Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Crystal Clear. I have the gorgeous, wonderful soul sister of mine, Miss Jen Smith, who is a hell of a business executive coach and life coach. And honestly, she's like one of the people in my journey that really taught me to own my shit and get me out of my ruts and also gives the best hugs ever. So welcome, Jen.
That was nice. I'll own that. Thank you for that. I love giving hugs, especially to you.
You do the best hugs. But we've done a number of retreats now, and the first one was 4 years ago, which is
Yes.
hard to believe. And it was with my YPO group, the spouse forum of executive husbands. And you essentially came in, and I'll never forget. Like, I was telling you all this stuff about my husband, and blah, 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 and you're like, well, what's your fucking story? like, okay, your husband sounds great, or whatever you guys are going through. What's your fucking story? And I'm like, what is my story?
Yeah,
And it all kind of unfolded from there.
it
So thank you
did.
for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Because that was kind of that, like, whoo, you know how you fall off the swing set when you're a kid? You like really fly far the swing set, and you fall and you like the wind gets knocked out of you.
Yes.
But you get up and you're like, okay, like the adrenaline kicked in. Like I'm
Yeah.
ready to go now.
Yeah.
That's what it did for me.
That's amazing.
So
That
thank
was
you.
such a fun group. It was
It
really, and
was fun. We're a very
talking about
diverse group.
exploring.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, did we explore in that
We're a
however
diverse
many
group.
hours? Yeah, you are.
Very, very different and have some ebbs and flows. But
hmm
yeah,
Yeah, it
it's
was
been good.
wonderful.
Well,
It was
thank you.
wonderful. And now we have evolved.
We have evolved.
You have evolved.
Yeah, I have evolved.
Very much
We've both
so.
evolved.
We've both evolved, and we're sitting here.
We are. And we actually come from the same similar little place in
I
Tallahassee. A
know.
little outside. So we're little Tallahassee lassies at heart, but barefoot now in Sarasota.
Love it.
Yeah, me too.
I love every second of it.
Oh gosh, yes.
Country, beach, best of both
Best of
worlds.
both worlds. And you
All
don't
of
have to
these
drive.
energetic souls here in Sarasota with this magical universe that we live in.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. So tell us a little bit. Like, how would you like to? I had my own description of you. Um, yeah. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you now? What are you up to now?
What I'm up to is I'm working with senior leaders and executives, and I really like that. And I actually didn't know that I wanted to do that until I was presented the opportunity over the last couple of years to see and work with these different leaders. I still have my own personal clients, and those clients range from business owners to moms that are getting into business.
Hmm.
I definitely work with leaders who want to lead and
Right.
want to serve and have a leadership mentality. So I'm between that executive coaching and I'm doing business development, which I've been doing since I closed Lilu,
Oh,
which was, um, sweet and sour at the same time, but it's led me here. And I just absolutely love what I'm doing and I love the people that I'm working with. And I'm really happy.
good. And I'm excited. I feel like we've had our ebbs and flows and 911 calls
Oh
and girl
gosh,
chats
I
and all the
know.
things for each other.
Yeah.
It's like one thing turns into a retreat of you telling me to own my shit. And then it's like, well, you know what? I'm going to help you own yours too. We're going to get through this. I love it. I love how these relationships start off and how they transpire.
Yeah.
And we did, I watched you speak at Bluebird, an event. What was it,
Mhm.
last summer? I feel like
I
time is
think
flying by. I
so.
have no concept of time.
Me either.
And you really talked about, and it was a big group of women, for
Mhm.
those who aren't familiar, and you really spoke a lot about like how you got to where you are now.
Mhm.
Because, share a little bit about that if you're open to it. Like where were your biggest pivots? What were your biggest, like, you know what, I need to shake this up. This just isn't for me.
I think
When
the
did
most relevant one pertaining to this subject is my divorce.
Yeah.
It's not something that I talk about a lot, but when I
Hmm.
do talk about it, I talk about it in detail. And my going through that divorce was one of the most ground shattering events of my entire life. To your topic of owning your shit,
Hmm.
I had to look at myself and every aspect of my life because I knew that I had had a hand in where we were
Right.
and I couldn't move forward until I figured out the whys and what I did and how I could do it differently because I knew that I didn't want to like
Pattern.
repeat
Yeah.
all of those patterns again. And so in that moment where we separated, I decided I can sit in it or I can figure out why. And, a country girl from the South who has I'm a farmer's daughter, get your shit together, you get after it, pull up your bootstraps and keep going. If you want it done right, do it yourself
Mhm.
mentality. That wasn't serving me anymore. I needed
Right.
help.
Right.
I needed a lot of help.
Right.
So I started going into different places and I went to the bottom of the barrel. I hit bottom. And talking about a pivot, again, I could sit in all of that misery or I could figure out what to do with it next.
Right.
So that was a huge pivot and then I subsequently moved out of a house of 7 to a house of 1, closed my brick and mortar business, started a new business, got divorced, COVID. I mean,
Co-parenting.
co-parenting.
Whole different
That's
animal.
a whole different animal. Yeah. So that was a big pivot in my life. And what I found out is that I'm a really fucking awesome person. I just had to get rid of some pretty old patterns and behaviors that weren't serving me anymore. And I had to face them and I
Yeah.
had to be honest about them. And I had to look them in the mirror and decide if I was going to take them with me or leave them in that barrel that I was floating in. And
Right.
I would say 90% of them I left in that barrel.
I love it. And how
Yeah.
long do you feel like that particular journey of facing it, owning it. I mean, for me, I feel like it's continuous.
Yes.
I feel like sometimes I'm swirling in my barrel. Like sometimes I'm out, I peek my head out, sometimes I pop back in. So how long do you feel? Because I know a lot of people are like, I want a quick fix. Everything's gonna be fine if I do these two things. And I'm like,
Mm.
and even when you do all the work, like what does it take? Like the recent stuff we were talking about before we got on air here. Like
Mhm.
all it takes is a hurricane or two or
Mhm.
some destruction and like neurologically in our brain, that looks like
Mhm.
warfare.
Mhm.
So we all become survivors again, whether
Mhm.
no matter how much trauma healing we've had, it puts us back in that fight, flight, fear, fawn, what the fuck
Yes.
am I doing
Right.
stage.
Right.
And so it's continuous. And I think that
Mhm.
that's something that I express a lot is like healing is not linear
No, it
and
is
it's
not.
continuous growth because
Mhm.
what I've found for myself is I've gotten out of a lot of my patterns, but then I create new patterns of some
Mhm.
sort. And then, but sometimes, and I feel like I'm kind of getting in that phase now, some stuff just gets stale.
Mhm.
Like whether it's the same talk therapist
Mhm.
or the same workout routine
Mhm.
or the same, just I am a person that needs to shake things up. Like I can't be
Mhm.
doing one thing all the time.
Yeah.
I'm not built that way. I've never been built that way. Very much like you. If you want it done right, do it yourself,
Yeah.
push it aside and work through. I can't do that because then what happens? It shows up nasty for me
Always.
and it never works.
Yeah.
It never works. But I
Yeah.
think that our society, all this masculine energy that we're surrounded by kind of creates that because I feel like I have more of a tendency to lean towards more on the masculine energy side than the feminine
Mhm.
sometimes, which I'm
Mhm.
really trying to tap more into the feminine. But like society, and you see this, I'm sure, in business development. So
Mhm.
how have you found your balance with that?
Okay. So
Because that's a big one.
I'm going to answer. You had one question, and that was how long did it take me? Because
Yeah.
I think that's important.
Yeah.
When I was in the real thick of it and I prioritized it, and that's a key word.
Right.
I prioritized that and I wanted to go after it. And I will say, I do not advise this to anybody. Okay. So I'm going to note this is an advisory warning. I don't advise this. I went after everything.
Yeah.
Everything. And I'm talking about different things in my childhood, different things with my dad, different things with my second dad, different things in my life growing up. I mean, I went after all of it at the same time. I went after everything that was happening with my divorce, what got me there. I went after the guilt, the shame, all of that. And I went after it at one time with many different modalities.
Mhm.
And it was horrific.
Mhm. I can relate. I did the same.
Um, but how long did that take me? A solid 3 years.
Yeah.
And I turned 40. So
Oh.
there was all of this other emotional stuff going on when a woman gets into her early 40s that I was also going through,
Right.
like holy shit, thank
Right.
you. But every time where something would come up, do you know that episode in Forrest Gump where Lieutenant Dan is on the sailboat
Yeah, and he's
and he looks up at the heavens and he says, "Is that all you've got? Bring it
yeah.
on." That's me. Everything that came up, if it wasn't just ripping me to pieces, I'm like, "Is that it? What the fuck else?"
Yeah.
Because bring it.
Right.
Again, that was a solid, I would say, 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
But it has been an ongoing process. But I will tell you that because I chose to do that, when I got on the other side of it and I finally was able to look myself in the mirror, and I'm talking about I dissected the lies, the deceit,
Mhm.
um, and I looked everything in the face from my previous 40 years. I was, I have been so peaceful.
Mhm.
I'm at a place in my life where I can look at you with 100% certainty and tell you, I'm at peace. You, the gods, the president, your best friend, my exes, I can't get rattled.
Right.
I get irritated. I
Right.
get frustrated, but I'm
Right.
able to work through it a lot better than I've ever been in my life.
Right.
And sometimes I have to pinch myself and I go, is this possible?
Mhm.
And then to your next point is it's always ongoing though.
Right.
Those other patterns and those other things that come up, I take the time to go stop. Like you said earlier, I'm learning how to just not.
Yeah.
I just don't.
Yeah.
I lock the gate at
Mhm.
my country house
Yeah.
and I sit behind that gate on my property and I process it, whether it's 10 minutes or 10 hours, and
Yeah.
then I'm done.
Right.
And then I come out the gate and I'm fine.
Right.
I'm good. And then anyway, to the next question about balance of I love the topic about masculine and feminine energy because when it comes to owning your shit, both of those
Mhm.
energies have different pathways
Yep.
to get to owning your shit. And I've navigated between both of them. And I think that as women, especially when women figure out how to navigate between the masculine and the feminine, that is when we become the most powerful universal being that you're ever gonna
Right.
become.
Like unapologetically.
Unapologetically
Right.
amazing.
Yeah.
And I guess it goes back to that same statement is that when something comes up, I have to prioritize the time to
Mhm.
work through it.
Right.
I had a conversation with a friend at dinner on Tuesday, and on the way there, something happened. And when we sat down together, he said to me, "Wow, what's going on with you? What's happening?" And I'm like, something just came up, and I have to work through it. Like
Mhm.
I'm processing right now. And I said, "You know what? I don't want to be here. I got to go."
Yeah.
And I got up and left.
Yeah. And that's okay.
That's okay.
And I'm sure he didn't care.
Not at all. And if
Right.
he did, I don't give a fuck.
Right. I love it. Well, and that's more of what we need. And I think that's my whole point of doing this podcast is
Yes.
giving people different perspectives to give them permission
Right.
because everyone's lens is different. Everyone has a different childhood, everyone has a different background, everyone has a different reality. You
Mhm.
can have a family of 6 people and every single person has like a totally different perspective of mom, dad, siblings,
Completely.
everything,
Yes.
which I think is fascinating. But it really boils down to like ownership
Yeah.
and taking responsibility for like, if you would have muscled through that dinner, you would have not been present. You would right. You would have not enjoyed your food. It would have
No.
been you probably weren't even hungry at that point,
Mm-mm.
but you took the time for yourself.
Mhm.
And that's something I'm realizing is just so necessary. Like my
Mhm.
husband and I had a conversation about this last night.
Mhm.
Life catches up.
Mhm.
Like, and there's a lot of it, but you have to set boundaries. I have to set boundaries on myself and just being like, you know what? Nope, I can't.
Mhm.
And not explaining myself.
Mhm.
That's one thing I've
That's a
really,
big one.
really tapped into is like, no, I
Mhm.
can't go without
Mhm.
saying, because like it's no one gives a shit.
Nope.
No one cares why you
No.
can't go.
Right.
Like when someone, and I realize that when I have like, and I love them, but I have some friends that are over explainers.
Yeah.
And every time I'm like, that's a trauma response. Just stop. This is a wrong person. No one cares. No one cares
No one
at all.
cares. No.
Like, and they're always like, I love you. Thank you. And I'm like, seriously.
Yeah.
Because when you get into the, just say no. Because that's powerful.
Period.
Like knowing that
Yeah.
no is a full sentence
Uh-huh.
when someone told me that, it may have even been you, I don't even remember. I was like, "No shit." It is.
It so is.
It's different when your teenagers are giving it back to you,
That's a little bit
but
different.
it's also respecting that
Mhm.
no is a complete sentence for them too.
Mhm. It's
Depends on the eye rolls and the tone of voice and everything
yeah,
else,
there's
but
everything else that comes with it. When my son says no to me, he'll look at me and he'll give me a look that I used to give my mother that I still give people. And
Mhm,
now I'm seeing it's like looking
mhm,
myself in the mirror and he'll go, "No," and he'll look at me as if he's waiting for something so that he can respond to it.
mhm.
And then I go, "Okay,
Right,
you're right.
right.
No." Because anything that comes after that statement,
Is a reaction.
I don't really give a fuck about.
Right.
And it's either I'm provoking something,
Mhm.
or I'm wanting to start
Or
something
protecting an
or
ego
protecting an
or a
ego.
powered
Right.
parental I mean, we came
Right.
from that generation of, you know, because I said so of
Exactly.
parents, and
Right.
it's like, really, that's not a thing.
It's
Like,
right.
it's really I mean, I understand respect and,
Yeah.
it is a thing, but, like, I have never strive to be that parent that's
Yeah.
never a "because I said so,"
Right. Yeah.
or "I'm gonna go do all this shit, but because I tell you not to do it, you're not supposed to do
That's a
it."
whole
It's
other
like, that's a whole
podcast.
other thing. That's a whole series of a podcast.
That's a whole southern
But that's
thing.
been a big transition for us because that's like Matt and I have had some extreme life changes when our kids became adolescents because I
Yeah.
don't wanna be that parent. I want
Mhm.
them to explore and do all the things that we did, and I wanna be able to wanna pick them up.
Mhm.
I wanna be able to wanna be like, "You know what? That sucks, doesn't it? Like, that doesn't taste real good coming back up." Like, or whatever it is that they're doing.
Yes.
Good kid so
Yeah.
far, knock on wood.
Yes.
But and just being in those moments of, "You know what? I want you to explore life, and I'm gonna love you unconditionally through it,"
Mhm.
because I don't know if I really I mean, I received it, but I think I also tested a lot of boundaries,
Mhm.
which
Mhm.
everyone does.
Mhm.
So,
It's
how do
part of growing
you
up.
navigate that with your kids? Because you have bonus children, you have
Mhm.
biological so what has been your biggest kind of pivot in parenting when it comes to this? Like, setting boundaries like we talked about, and you mentioned your son saying no.
Mhm.
So, how do you not react to that? Having the background of because I feel like most of our generation does. It's like children
Mhm.
should be seen and not heard, and because I said
Mhm.
so, and because they're an adult, you listen to what they say, and it's like, they're not making any fucking sense.
Whenever I decided, and that's it, whenever I decided that I was going to be a mother and not a daughter anymore,
Right,
was another earth shattering moment for me in my life because my mom was challenging me on some beliefs at the time. And I said to her respectfully, "It's my turn
right.
now. I'm a mom and
Mhm.
I have these values and I have things that are important to me and they're different than yours. And I
Right.
respect that and I honor that. But I'm the mom now and this is my son and these are the values that I want to instill in him. And if you can respect that, then
Mhm.
it's always going to be open doors and we're going to be on the same island together. But if you can't, then we're going to have to make some shifts."
Mhm.
And in that moment, it set me free because I knew that I was going to be able
Right.
to be authentic in my parenting and I was going
Mhm.
to be able to set those boundaries and I was going to be able to navigate between my bonus kids and my child. And, we go through attachment and
Mhm.
releasing attachment,
Right.
and I even it just came up right now that I said my son, and it's an interesting concept when we say they're mine,
Right.
they're
Because
my kids and they're
he's
mine. Well, he's his own.
yeah.
I'm raising a man. I'm
Right.
not raising a baby.
Right.
Same thing with my girls, and and it's just so interesting the dynamic. And the first thing I want to say is I had to release attachment with my bonus kids because they have a mother and a father.
Right.
So when we divorced, that was one of the most shocking attachments that I had to work through because I was so used to having them with me and I was so
Right.
used to having that time spent. But I can't expect them to go between
3
three
houses, yeah.
homes. That's not okay. So I had to dig deep within myself. I had to be honest about what my choice was
Mhm.
and I had to own it. This is what got me here. this is the choice that I made. This is the choice that we've made collectively. And now I have to figure out a new pattern. Um, but if so far as behavioral stuff, one of the things that I taught Bodhi whenever he was little was your teachers are not always right.
Oh, no.
Because he had a
No.
teacher that he came home one afternoon and he told me that one of his teachers was yelling at him. And he goes, and I said, "How did that make you feel?" And he goes, "Honestly, I didn't like it. I didn't
Mhm.
like it, Mom. It kind of hurt my feelings a little bit."
Mhm.
And he said, and then I got mad.
Yeah, 'cause it's embarrassing.
Yeah, and I said, "Okay, so we had this whole conversation about your teachers are not always right.
Right.
The adults in your life are not always going to
Mhm.
be right. Guess who that always includes?
Right.
Me."
Exactly.
And so it's interesting the dynamic of that lesson because now at almost 14 years old, he will say, "I disagree with you.
Mhm.
Quite frankly, I think you're wrong." That kid has an exceptional vocabulary too, by the way. So when he does these big words with me, he's like, "I think you're wrong." I am peace and
No.
serenity. I am peace and serenity. Okay. Tell me what you got.
Right.
And then I have to check my ego,
Right.
remove that old belief pattern from many moons ago of I'm right, you're wrong, I'm the parent, you're not, and listen and
Right.
actively listen,
Right.
not just looking
Listen to
out or
react
being
or respond.
irritated and,
Yeah.
trying to be sassy. I have to actively engage with him, honestly, or we're going to get into a fight.
Or hear his heart.
Yes.
And I think that that's something that I know for me, like, once I started to listen to my own heart, it
Mm-hmm.
allowed me to be able to listen to other people's
Mm-hmm.
perspectives, their opinions,
Huge.
their values, and just like you said, like, going into I want to go back to that conversation with you and your mom. That's a perfect example, and I've talked about this on previous podcasts, perfect example of having an adult relationship with your
Yeah.
parents. I know so many people that still do not have adult relationships with their parents. They
Mm-hmm.
still allow their adult parents to parent them, then parent their children, and
Mm-hmm.
it just becomes this cycle of I mean, I it's a blessing now that my mom and I were like sisters growing up and she was like my, crazy sister that went off and did crazy things and came back and I was raised by my grandparents, but we've always kind of had an adult I always felt like the adult in this situation anyway,
Mm-hmm.
but we've always had that together. But I've had to work with my grandparents who raised me on having that setting those boundaries of, you know what? I'm the parent now, and
Mm-hmm.
that's okay, and I'm pretty fortunate they interfere too much, but
Mm-hmm.
I see that a lot, especially with females or males that seek approval from their parents. It's like, "Okay, you didn't get that when you were little, but guess what? You can give that to your children."
Mm-hmm.
And you can do it for yourself. So
Mm-hmm.
when I started working on like, what do I want for me? Instead of what do I want them to want for me, it shifted everything.
That question that you just said is a huge question for women especially. I mean, I think
Mhm.
men too, but
Yeah.
what do I want? What do I want for me?
Right.
That in keeping with the topic of ownership and if you if a person can't figure out what it is that they want
Mhm.
or like someone doesn't want to take the time, prioritize the time to figure out that question, the needle's never going to move.
No,
Don't you feel that? I
100%.
mean, it's never gonna
That's
go
what
anywhere. You're gonna stay in one spot and you're gonna rotate
yeah.
around like a cat chasing its tail.
Mhm.
That question is probably the key to evolution,
It 100% is. And
right?
that's what that conversation leads me to our first conversation. You made me think because I can
Yeah.
sit there and bitch all day long about the things that aren't going right.
Yeah.
But what do I want?
What do you
What
want?
do you want? And I'm like, well, I just had this new baby and it's like, well, I want to be a mom, but I want to fulfill my purpose. And my
Yeah.
purpose isn't just being a mom. And like, look at us now. Like it's working.
Yes.
It's and I didn't even know what that was at the time.
Right.
I just knew that I had a desire to help people. I wanted to feel validated. I wanted to express my feelings. I wanted to
Mhm.
heal. I wanted to share that.
Mhm.
And it's just all worked out the way it's supposed to work out. And I think that understanding what I wanted and what I wanted in my relationships. Like, what type of relationship
Huge.
did I want with
Mhm.
my up and coming teenagers? What type of
Mhm.
relationship did I want and need from my spouse?
Mhm.
And are we
Mhm.
both willing to evolve? And that was the key because it took both of us evolving, and that's one thing, and that's I mean, I've this is my second marriage because the first one wasn't there was no evolution there.
Mhm.
It was stuck, and it
Mhm.
wasn't and I was in a people-pleasing phase of very young, and, I was 22 years old when I started the relationship and 27 when I got divorced.
Yeah.
And I was a baby,
Yeah.
and I had a baby in the middle, and she's the most wonderful thing ever, but, co-parenting has been no joke. But
No joke.
I didn't know what I wanted then
Mhm.
because it was kinda like, "Whew, this is your situation," and I was like, "Oh, okay." But this time I felt like I had a choice,
Mhm.
and I
And
got to choose.
and just think about how long that process of not wanting knowing what you want has gone on.
Right,
And like your friends and people, I have people that still at in their late 40s, early 50s haven't answered that question yet.
right.
And I'm like, you're more than halfway through your life. And if you don't know what you want in your life as in a relationship or a partnership, in how you want to parent, co-parent, where you want to go, like if you're going to go to Georgia, do you just go, okay, I'm going to get in my vehicle and just drive?
Mhm.
Or do you look at your map and figure out what's the best way to get there?
Right.
And the other question is I like is how much do you lie to yourself?
Oh
We've had
god.
this conversation.
Yeah.
That broke me wide open
100%.
about if even I mean something as simple as I'm going to get up and go to the gym in the morning.
Mhm.
And if you think about how many times you didn't get up and go to the gym in the morning even though you told yourself you were going to go to the gym in the morning, you
Mhm.
have opened yourself up, you have lied to yourself, you've delivered that lie and you've given yourself permission to be a fucking slob.
Yep.
And then it just repeats itself. And then it's 40 years later. Look at that pattern development. Now it's,
Mhm.
I'm going to go meet here. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And
Or
all
I'm
of these,
okay.
or I'm
I'm
okay.
okay.
I'm
No. Well,
fine.
that was my
I
biggest one.
hate that
Everything's
word.
fine. Everything will be fine. I was
Yeah.
not fine.
No,
I was not fine.
nobody's fine when they say they're fine.
No one's fine when I hate the word fine, actually, unless you're like, "Ooh, you look fine." I mean,
Yes.
that's
Now
one
that's
thing.
different.
That's different. And that's just it.
Yeah.
And it's like, that is huge. And I
Yes.
actually had this conversation I had breakfast with Lauren today
Yeah.
after I did this mediumship, and like my dad came through, and um this I see Nadine from Spiritual Healing Art. She's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, he is vicariously living through you because you don't tell yourself little white lies. But there was a time period where I did all the time.
Yeah.
Like, "Oh, I'm okay," or "This is fine," or "This relationship is healthy,"
Mm-hmm.
or "It's gonna get better,"
Or I'm
or
happy.
"I'm happy," or "Guess
Or,
what?"
ooh, that was
Or
a
"I
really
have to be
great
happy."
orgasm.
Right. And it's like, no, like, you are
Mm-hmm.
in need of intimacy and connection and
Mm-hmm.
all these things, and I think for a long time, I just didn't even know what really was.
Yeah.
I think we all have to figure out what that means to us because just
Yeah.
like anything else, those are it's different. It's different for every couple, it's different for every
Yes.
person, and that constantly evolves.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
just feel like it's intimacy and connection now looks very different than it did 5 years ago. And I'm sure it
Mhm.
looks very different than it will in 5 more years. And
Yes.
even with myself,
Yeah.
like, what do I like to do in my quiet moments? And when I
Mhm.
started living honestly in my quiet moments,
Mhm.
I'm not scrolling on my phone. I'm not calling and chit-chatting and gossiping and talking
Mhm.
shit. Not that I did that a lot, but you can get on the wheel of complaining and victimizing and live in that like victim mentality of life is happening to me. And when
Mhm.
I started just being like, you know what, I'm gonna go for a nice walk and I'm gonna go to a yoga class and I'm gonna live my truth of where I want to go. So just like you said, like you're not gonna go to Georgia without not knowing how to get there.
Right.
I had to figure out what would get me to peace
Mhm.
and like a solid place,
Mhm.
which, solidity depends on the day. I'll just say that. But
It
it's
does.
getting there. Like we said before, it's constantly evolving. And
Yeah.
it's okay to give yourself permission to
Mhm.
change it up
Mhm.
and shift it,
I
shake it
think
up.
one of the best takeaways for me with owning your shit is to not lie to yourself anymore.
Yeah.
And for people to understand, I had to really understand. I had to go through and write everything down. And this is what one of my therapists during that time said to me. She said, "Go and write down all the lies that you told yourself."
I love that.
I'm
You
like,
had us do that
"Oh,
exercise.
yes." And
Yeah.
I still use that with my clients.
Hmm.
But I was like, could you give me some clarity on that, like in the last 6 months? And she went, "No, child, in the last like forever." I mean, do you know how long the paper was? It was like 9 pages. I still have it in
I
that
love
book,
that.
and it was like one-liners. 9 pages of notebook paper. You know
I
how many
love that.
lies that is? But I got into it though. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm talking about everything.
What were the
Everything,
biggest ones? Tell us the biggest ones. Let's share because 'cause I'm
um
sure everyone can relate.
well, the well, one of the things was about sex,
Yeah.
about when you say that something feels good and it
Mhm.
doesn't feel good. That was huge for me because I
Mhm.
had some sexual things
Mhm.
in my youth that I didn't realize had carried through.
Mhm.
Gee, I can't even believe I just said that out loud, actually. Um, yeah, I didn't realize that it had carried through into my adult life, and
Right.
as I'm coming into 40, now 8 years ago, it was like, you know something, this actually doesn't feel good.
Right.
So why do you say that it feels? Why do I say that this feels good when it doesn't fucking feel good?
Right.
Like,
Inside or outside, like
inside or
physically or
outside. Right. If
emotionally.
you don't know how to use your words, and I tell my kids this all the time, if you can't converse about what it is that you're doing with the person that you're doing it with, and I say this to my business clients, don't do it.
Right.
If you can't talk about business with your business partner and you can't talk about finances with your business partner and all the things, if you can't talk about sex and if you can't talk about parenting, then don't do it. You have no business doing it. You need to
Right.
back the fuck up, write a plan down, and
Mhm.
then press go again.
Right.
So I applied all of those techniques and that exercise about writing all of these lies. So to your question, sex, parenting, the reasons that I sabotaged my divorce,
Mhm.
um, my own behaviors, the reasons that I was allowing that behavior to keep happening.
Right.
And I don't like the word I don't know,
Right.
or the phrase, but I did have some I don't knows. And
Mhm.
then I took those topics and I put them on a separate piece of paper. And whatever topic that was that I wasn't sure about, that's what I started with because
Okay.
I needed to figure out why. And
Yeah.
then I started exploring, well, okay, where's the lie in here? And do you really not know?
Right.
Or are you covering up what really hurts you and what
Right.
you're afraid of and ashamed of, and you
Mhm.
don't want to say out loud? That's the thing. Whenever we separated, I couldn't say the word divorce because there was guilt and
Mhm.
shame
Mhm.
attached to that word for me.
Right.
How I reprogrammed it was that it's an opportunity for me to become a better mother
Mhm.
and a better woman.
Right.
And that's essentially what I started to teach my kids. But for the first 18 months, I couldn't say the word divorce. I explored that. Why? What does that shame look like? Where does the guilt come from? And
Where
um,
did that come from for you?
the most came from I thought that I was ruining my kids' lives.
Mhm.
I thought that by advocating for myself and realizing that it wasn't going to work for
Mhm.
multiple reasons. Make no mistake. I am putting my hand up
Right.
saying, I fucked up.
Right.
I didn't get there by myself because he fucked up too.
Right.
But the biggest was I thought I was ruining my kids' lives
Mhm.
by leaving and that I needed to stay. That's a whole other
Yeah.
topic. But I needed to stay but I realized that I couldn't. Other shame and guilt was what I did to get there
Right.
and my behaviors and this old belief system. And there were some things that I was running away from. I was sabotaging certain parts of my relationship because I was terrified about what was underneath the reason of why I was sabotaging it.
I think that is huge for most people.
Yeah, and I had to be honest because
Mhm.
all of that stuff that was fueling those behaviors was real ugly. It
Mhm.
was real nasty. And
Right.
there was a lot of lies wrapped in that until I could look myself in the face and say, this is what you've done. These are the things that you did to get here. And now let's figure out how to change it so that you don't repeat it moving forward. If I had never done that process, I would still be there.
Right. And if you had never done those things, you wouldn't have had this growth. And
Exactly.
that's what I want people to understand and really take from this
Right.
is by facing your shit, it might feel icky and sticky and nasty for
Yeah.
a little while,
Yeah.
but when you get on the other side of it, it is so freeing because then it's like You don't have shit on me. Like,
Yes.
talking about your own demons, your own shadow work, and
Yeah.
and stuff constantly comes up.
Yeah.
I mean, my daughter hit 14. Some stuff came up for me. Like, I wrote a lot of 14-year-old crystal letters this past summer
Mm.
because I needed to work through my own stuff. So I
Mhm.
didn't project my 14-year-old self into her because,
Mhm.
I had some weird things happen to me when I was a teenager. And for so long, I feel like I held shame and guilt and fear
Mhm.
and all of this stuff. And going back to like sexuality, it have 100,000% affected my sexuality because I didn't know what I needed, what I wanted, and what felt good to me. I
Mhm.
didn't know. I don't think I knew that until I met my current husband. And like until you find like a safe person
Mhm.
when it comes to sexuality, like there's
Huge.
not it's a game changer.
It is a
Like a
game
mind,
changer.
body, spirit, and
Yeah.
it hasn't always been that way. We've had to work to get there for
Can
each other.
can we do a sex podcast?
Yes, let's do a sex podcast. We're doing a sex podcast coming up soon.
Um,
Um,
can I just tell you something to
yeah.
that point really quick?
Mhm.
I went to a silent retreat last year, 7 days in silence, and something that came up in one of the practices that we did there was rape.
Mhm.
Was I was raped, and I think that many young women, especially in college scenarios, can say that. And do you know what I used to tell myself?
What?
Oh, I was just taken advantage of.
I was just drunk.
I was just drunk, and I shouldn't have been. I put myself in that position. It actually makes me sweat because it's still hard for me to say
Yeah.
that I was raped. And until I said that at that silent retreat, Crystal, I was 47. That was last year.
I remember when you went on that retreat.
It took me 40, well, I mean, I was in college, so I
Yeah.
was probably in my early 20s, but it took me over 20 years to be able to come to say that. And I've got like tears are swelling up in the back of my
Same.
eyes right now. Um, that's what I'm talking about to the topic of owning your shit.
Yeah. Because I
If
think
you
as women, we hold that.
It's a
We
lie.
make
If you
excuses
were
for it.
raped and you say, "Oh, I was drunk." Yes, you were drunk. Great.
Right.
But that doesn't give somebody else the wherewithal to take advantage of you. That's
Right.
on them. Yeah,
Mhm.
you got drunk. Fine. But
Mhm.
that doesn't mean that somebody puts their hands on you.
Mhm.
And just to even I wrote it down, like to say that, "Oh, I was taken advantage of." The fuck? That's what I'm
Right.
talking about, not lying to yourself.
Yeah.
And, I love this topic of owning your shit as an
Mhm.
individual. I mean, we could talk
Mhm.
about it on so many different levels, but
Yeah.
I mean, I guess if anybody's listening, when people listen to this, and
Mhm.
I see you, by the way, is that don't lie to yourself
Yeah.
about anything. Say those hard words, say the nasty things that you have to say and that you need to say so that you can release the anchors that are in you
Mhm.
so that you can move forward in your own healing process and journey, especially if you have little people in your life. Like my
Yeah.
girls, if anything ever happened like that to them, and I'm not showing them how to use their words and how to use their voice and how to not lie to themselves and to own their shit, even if it's embarrassing,
Mhm.
you have to say it.
Yep.
Now the Jennifer today, would take that situation very differently than the Jennifer at 20.
Right.
Um, I'm not gonna publicly say what would happen now,
Right.
but
Stay under the
it
radar.
will look a lot different than it did
Right.
27 years ago. Um,
Absolutely.
I
And
was even scared to go. My honestly, if my mom ever listens to this, she's probably going to be shattered because I have never said that to her.
right.
Um,
But you know what? I feel like most people can relate to that in some way, shape, or form. Sadly, I know I can.
yeah,
Florida State for you.
Florida State, same.
I mean, but or even in relationships. Like when you're in a relationship, and I'm just going to throw it out there, and you're not feeling it,
I just have to hold your hand for just a
and
second.
you do it anyway, that's the same stuff. It affects us internally the same way.
Hmm.
If you're in a relationship and you're not intimately attracted to that person
Mhm.
and you're being sexual with them anyway, it's the same thing.
It's the same thing.
And I hate to burst the bubble on that, but I think a lot of people need to hear it. I love you.
I love you
And
too.
thank you for sharing that because this is the raw truths of life. Like
Mhm.
this is the rawness, and the intent for this is because we can all relate to it in some way, shape, or form.
Mhm.
Whether it's, something very traumatic or something just like I described, like lack of intimacy in your own marriage or with your
Mhm.
spouse or your partner, and you're just doing it anyway.
Mhm.
Those are the lies.
Mhm.
And I think some of the biggest lies as adults we tell ourselves
Mhm. I agree.
that we're okay and it's
Yeah.
okay and we're
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
Everything's fine. And we project and we pretend. And the
Mhm.
world of social media is just a whole other
That's a
friggin'
whole other thing too.
it's a whole other thing. It's like we
Mhm.
have this pseudo society that we're pretending
Mhm.
and this ability to pretend. And I don't want to do that.
Mm-mm.
I'm not doing it anymore.
No. Good for you.
And we've all
I'm
done
not
it.
doing it either.
No.
No.
I mean,
What
I've
you see
done
is
it.
what you get.
Yeah, what you see is what you get.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Yeah. Me too.
And thank you. I mean, that's, it's deep stuff. And I
Mhm.
appreciate you sharing your heart and your experiences because we can always edit it out if you
Kind
want
of hot. A little hot. Is there whiskey under this table anywhere?
But I think that so many people will take a pause and step back and hopefully write their list.
I hope that
I
they
hope
write their
that they
list.
write their list. So if you're listening, your homework. And I'm going to do this again. I've done it before, but I'm doing it again
Yeah.
because I might have more at this point in
Oh,
time.
yeah. Yeah.
I might have some creep up that I don't even like. Oh, I love driving to school in the morning. Like, or
Not.
whatever it is.
Yes.
I love Disney World.
Yeah.
Do it for the kids,
Do
okay.
it for the kids.
But write your list.
Mhm.
What is the story you're telling yourself?
Mhm.
And what is reality? Because that
Huge.
was a huge thing for me. And I used to even Matt and I joke, we're like, well, the story I'm telling myself it's like a whole Brene Brown thing.
Yes.
Because it's true. It's
Yeah.
like, he can have a day or whatever. And I'm like, well, the story I'm telling myself is you don't want to be around me right now, blah, blah, blah. And
Mhm.
it's like, well, that's not it at all. Like he
Yeah.
just needs his own space. And I know that.
Yeah.
And so just owning that and respecting that for other people too. Like if someone says no, accept it
Yeah.
as a full sentence.
You know,
It's
it's
not always just one way. Like be
no.
able to receive it too. And that's a big hurdle.
That is a
You
big
can
hurdle.
give it, but being in a place to be able to receive it is a whole different ball game. And I've
Whole
had to
different.
really work to be there because what do you have to do? You have to, like you said earlier when you talked about your kids, you have to release your ego. You
Mhm.
have to release that listening to respond and react. You have to
Mhm.
actively listen and hear their heart, like that
Mhm.
nonviolent communication. Have you read that book? So
Mm-mm.
good, and you would love
No.
it.
I
It
wrote that
teaches
down.
you to really take a step back and instead of observing and labeling what the other person is talking about in the conversation, what is bringing
Yes.
alive inside of me?
Yes.
Like, what do I need from this? I mean,
Mhm.
it's been life changing for me.
I'm gonna read that.
Oh, it's so good. I
You
listened
just
to it and I wrote it. I like to have notes all in it. I scribbled all in it. I love his voice too. He has a really good, like soft voice.
there's about the needing space, and this
Hmm.
was a lie that I was telling myself. I think this is really funny, especially women thinking that just because somebody needs space, like, oh my gosh, what is it about me? Do you not want to be around me? Do you not this? Do you not love me?
It's
Do you
an
love me any
insecurity.
less? One of my things now that I had to be really clear on is that I need more alone time than probably any three people that I know.
Yeah,
And
same.
until I was able to say that out loud and identify that's what I needed, I would I and I've only really kind of hung out with one person
Mhm,
since my divorce, but I've listened to a lot of people talking and I've had, friends that I go and have
mhm.
dinner with, but like the other night when I didn't want to
Yeah.
be there. But until I was able to get really clear that that's what I need and my needs are just as important as anybody else's needs in any kind of relationship, business or personal, I was always in these spaces
Mhm.
where I was uncomfortable. And then I would go home and I would be mad and frustrated because I
Mhm.
allowed myself to be in this space, or I let somebody, hey, I want to, can I come over and see you? Oh, yeah, of course. Come on.
Yeah, you take
Now
all
I'm
their
like,
shit, really, yeah.
no,
Mhm.
no,
I don't have space for
I'm not
that.
ready for it today.
Right.
And I just need some quiet time. It's like,
Right.
can we go to lunch today? No, how about in 4 weeks?
Mhm.
In 4 weeks, are you serious? Like, you want to
You know
put
how fast 4
four
weeks go
weeks?
by?
Right. But what's wrong with that?
Right.
Nothing.
Yeah.
So now moving forward in my life, as I'm, maybe contemplating possibly dating again, which I'm
Mhm.
not sure about yet, but I say that I need
Mhm.
alone time and
Mhm.
I need that honored. I don't want somebody living in my house. If I'm completely transparent, if
Mhm.
if and when I decide to date again, I need that person to have their own home.
Yeah.
I don't want to cohabitate. And I when I go home, I want to be left alone.
Right.
And I also don't want to go, oh, well, I'm doing this and I'm doing this and I'm doing this today.
Right.
Anyway, it's just that's a whole other.
No,
It's
I
just
love
I
it.
had to identify that that's what I
I feel like we need to
needed.
do a sex and relationships podcast. We have to do that's
Yes,
we gotta
please.
schedule that for when I get back from Peru. We have to
Yes,
schedule that
let's do that
because
because that
that's
would
gonna
be a
be a whole
funny,
good one. I mean,
and
and
that could go
that's
deep too. I
very
mean,
deep, and
very
that's
deep.
just it, and when, you know, I feel like it's so interesting, our relationship has evolved in so many different ways, myself and Matt, my husband.
Hmm.
When we started honoring each other's space and acknowledging that it's okay to need space.
Yeah.
You take that well, at first we both had to start owning our shit, which means what? You have to face what your codependencies are,
Yes. Yep.
right? And
Yep.
everyone has them.
Hmm.
Write your lies down to yourself if you don't. If you feel
Right.
like you don't have a codependency of some
Everybody
sort.
has them.
And it's attachment,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And in the healing journey, I've learned healthy detachment and how freeing that is. Like you were saying for your kids, like it is
Hmm.
like they're not my kids.
I
You know,
know.
I was blessed enough to just birth these beautiful souls into the world.
Hmm.
They're not mine any more than that vase over there is.
Right.
But
Right.
I'm responsible
Hmm.
for nurturing their spirits.
Hmm.
So when you think of it that way, it makes parenting a hell of a lot more pressure.
Yeah. I mean,
It
kind
really
of it
does.
does.
It really does. But it's also more of an honor
Yeah.
because what do you get? You get like a chance at reparent. It's been reparenting myself. It's
Which is
been
huge.
right, not parenting in my relationship with my
Which is
spouse,
huge.
which is huge because what do? It's like, "Oh, well, you shouldn't wear this. You shouldn't." Well, like, you're not his mom.
I
Like, what are we
know.
doing to each other?
Mhm.
But it goes down to too understanding like just because you weren't modeled that behavior doesn't mean you can't change it.
Mhm.
And it's hard to break, especially if your parents are still living and they're still digging in and,
Yeah.
all the things
Mhm.
and it comes from all different pressures of society too.
And as it is relationships, to what you just said about telling somebody like your partner about why you're wearing this and don't wear this and don't do that. That talking about, I mean, I'm not going to get on the whole masculine, like male
Mhm.
masculine. I mean, I love masculine men.
Mhm.
But for me, I've identified what masculinity to me looks like
Right.
and what makes me feel safe.
Mhm.
If somebody grabs me by the arm and
Mm-mm.
tells me to come here,
Mm-mm.
I'm probably going to injure that person
Yeah.
extremely, like
Yeah, that wouldn't
as
work for
best as
me.
I can.
Would not
It
work.
would be that's a hard fucking no. Go on about your business and we'll talk later, or we won't.
Right.
But masculine to me is someone that can cry and that
Mhm.
talks to me and that doesn't talk at me
Right.
and that is strong. And like, I mean, for me, honestly, take the fucking garbage out because I don't want to do it.
Right.
I have no problem with that whole thing.
Yeah.
I need something built. I don't even like to put together. I don't like to do things with like screws and
I know.
drills and
It's
shit.
overstimulating.
I just don't like it. It is
It's overstimulating.
overstimulating.
I open a package and I'm like,
Oh,
who can I
I
pay
have
to
an
do this?
Amazon thing that's been
Like,
sitting in my living room. I'm just going to ship it back. I told Bodie, I'm like, box it up. He said, I'll put it together. I'm like, nope, I'm tired of looking at it. I'm sending it back. But it's just funny. Again, it's like owning your shit. Like identifying what it is that you appreciate
mhm.
in your person,
Yeah.
male or female.
Mhm.
And if you fell in love with that person as they were,
Right.
stop. You're not their mom. You're not their
Right.
dad. Um, let them be. Let
Right.
them be masculine. Let them be feminine.
Mhm.
Bring out those qualities that you love.
Mhm.
And to your point earlier, identify in you
What it brings up.
what it brings up.
Yeah.
Because if you're telling somebody else to whatever, go, oh shit, this is an opportunity for me to look at myself.
Right. Instead of pointing the finger at them. And
Right.
guess what? When I started to do that, everything started to shift.
Right. I remember the
Everything.
conversations
You
that,
remember, like,
yes,
you were with
yes,
us through some
yeah,
of this, like, big ones, but also
huge.
he had to decide to do it for himself too.
Correct.
It would not have worked if it were just me.
No, it never
He
does.
chose to be like, "I think I need to look at my own shit too."
Yeah.
And
It's just
I
so
think
amazing.
I know, and I think I'm gonna cry, and I think I need to do something else too.
Yeah.
And it's constant. I mean, we had a heart to heart last night. It's a busy life.
Yeah.
Prioritizing.
Prioritizing.
Prioritizing each other and
Mhm.
prioritizing ourselves because
Yes.
we can only give so much. You can't pour from an empty cup. That's like
Mm-mm.
old time saying. It's
Mhm.
so true. You
Mhm.
can't. So we both, he and I both need alone time. We need our solitude time. I
Mhm.
know, like, I have to take some time for myself before I come home and in the door, we have a 4.5-year-old. He needs mom and he
Mhm.
deserves mom when I walk
Mhm.
into that door. So I try to get everything done before I get there. So I'm not the mom on my phone or,
Right.
I have to prioritize those things.
Yeah.
And I know when Matt walks in the door, he's got a lot of life gone on prior to walking in the door. He needs that walk in the yard when he gets home.
Yes.
So, keeping Brody busy and doing crafts and just honoring that space for each other.
Right.
And I think in relationships, breaking those codependent patterns
Mhm.
of always needing each other or checking in on each other all the time. I mean, there's nothing wrong with I love you and, having conversations, but there's a difference when it's coming from a place of codependency and attachment
Mhm.
and genuine love, care, and concern.
100%.
And it's been a huge growth process, and it still is. Things
Mhm.
come up, new opportunities
Mhm.
arise. I mean, I just went to freaking Italy for 10 days all by myself,
Which is amazing.
which is amazing. I mean, it came back to freaking hurricanes and
Right.
pneumonia and whatever, but like, if you would have told me 6 years ago that that was gonna happen, I would have been like, "You're out of your
Right.
mind. There's no way."
Yeah.
Because we were still in, like, a codependency circle with each other.
Yeah.
And we didn't know any better.
Yep.
It's like you do the best you can with the tools that you have. We did the best we could with the tools we have, and it makes me look back now and, there were times where I would just cycle through of, "Oh, there's a little," and it's like, we always tried our best.
Mhm.
And if you can look at life that way, and then it's happening for
For
you,
you.
say it all
Mhm.
the time, I probably said it on every single freaking podcast I've ever filmed,
Yes.
but I say it
It's
all the
so
time
true.
because it's so true.
Mhm.
And if you
Mhm.
feel like it's not, what is that bringing up inside you?
Somebody asked me yesterday, "How often do you check in with yourself?" Like, how often do you go through these processes that we're talking about or
Yeah.
teaching? And I say, "How often do you do your books?"
Mhm.
It's a business client.
Mhm.
"How often do you do your books?
Mhm.
Do you close out every month? Do you close out every quarter?" And he said, "Well, we close out every month, but I don't typically look at them until the end of the quarter." So I said, "You look at your books every quarter?" "Yes." "Do you look at your life, your personal life every quarter?" And he said, "No."
Mhm.
"Why? Why don't you do that?" And then he
Right.
said, "Well, wait a minute. I asked you the question." And I said, "You're right, but there's the answer. I
Right.
do mine honestly, just like I do my taxes.
Yeah.
Every quarter, I take a minute, which is probably about a day, half a
Yeah.
day, and I check in with myself. I go
Mhm.
back and I look at these lists. I
Mhm.
go back and I add to them. And I check in with, where am I? Where am I going? What's important to me right now? What's rocking me? Where do I need some help? Do I need outside help?
Mhm.
Do I need just what do I need and what am I doing? So
Right.
I'm going to ask you that question too.
All right.
How often do you, how often now are you checking in with yourself? And then also you two collectively as a
Mhm.
couple, how often are you doing that?
I would say for me, I'm seasonal, so I would say about quarterly because I feel like
Mm.
I change with the season. So it's like, what do I need in this
Yes.
season? I feel like I'm like an earth girl like
Boots,
that.
flip-flops,
The moon, I
the
will
moon.
say, I'm a
Yes.
big full moon. Like, what do I need to release?
Yeah.
And new moons, what do I need? What do I need right now? So honestly, probably
Monthly?
monthly
Mhm.
in that realm as far as deep dive into where am I going? Where is this all taking me? I think that
Mhm.
recently, I guess the past year, since I started the whole crystal clear in the podcast, I've kind of just left it open to I'm
Mm.
open to whatever is
Mhm.
coming. I'm just gonna let it flow because I feel like
Yeah.
I got into and I have a tendency to be like very, I'm going all in, but
Mm.
you can all in yourself too much. And it's like you're
Mhm.
not creating space for opportunities to come in. So I
Mhm.
feel like for that, that's where that's come from. And as far as Matt and I and our relationship goes, that's something like we're going to Peru next week. And that's something that we both need to check in.
Mm.
Like we need to check in.
Yeah.
And I would say we probably do that twice a year
Mm.
when
That's
we
good though.
travel together.
Yeah.
And but it could be more in depth,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
again, it constantly evolves. Like where do
Mhm.
we want it's not just the surface level stuff either. Like
Mhm.
where are we traveling and what are we doing next? It's like no, it's like what are we going to invest our time and our money in
Mhm.
for the next year? And he just actually posed a point to like, I think you should invest in your podcast more and have someone else put it out there for you and social media wise. And
Right.
I'm like, let me go to Italy and sit on it
I think that's a good
because I
idea
don't
too.
know if I want to do that. And I came back and I'm like, let's do it. And so they're doing it.
Good.
And at first I was like reading the comments and doing all that. And I'm like, no, I can't do that. I have to set boundaries for myself to post and ghost and let it go
Yeah.
because what's being put out there is meant for other people. It's not meant for me.
Mhm.
It's not something that, and I think that we get caught up in that with society is like it's an ego thing. Our egos get fed. Have you
Mhm.
read the four agreements? Like don't take
Mhm.
anything
Oh yeah.
personally, the good or the bad,
Mhm.
because what does that do? It's like
Mhm.
it feeds your false sense of self. So for
Mhm.
Matt and I, to get back to your question, I think that we check it and it's a bit different sometimes. We like to take long walks together. That's like our new date thing is we take long
Mm.
walks and
Mhm.
we'll have good conversations and really hearing him and listening to where he's at in his journey and him listening to where I am.
Mhm.
And then kind of like, okay, well, it's great that we have these individual journeys, but how are they going to merge? Like,
I
where do
love
we
that.
want this to go together?
Mhm.
Because yes, it's an individual journey, but you also it can get too separate if you allow it to.
Mhm.
So that's why we were kind of like, we need this trip. We need to take this time to reevaluate, like, what do we want to do next year or this year or right now or, and just kind of take the steps from there because it also has to kind of have a path.
So did you ask that question? Were those the questions on your last walk that you guys are gonna explore when you're on your trip?
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that.
Well, not last walk, but we've
Yeah.
kind of over time,
Yeah.
just like, what do we want to do?
Mhm.
There's beach properties that are freaking going for steel right now. Do we want to
Yes.
be super brave and snatch one up and have some sort of fun investment property or
Yeah.
is that freaking crazy? And I'm like, I think I need a little while to come off these disaster grant photos to get there,
Yes.
but it could be something fun
Right.
and nothing that's been in our path so far.
Yeah.
So also being open to, we're both kind of impulsive like that. Like, oh,
Mhm.
I want to do this. And it's like,
Mm.
hold on. Like sometimes we have to take a step back and allow each other to process through it. And that's
Yeah.
been a learning curve too, is being like, I'm going to honor your thoughts and your ambition and your impulsivity
Yes.
and let you talk without being like, I don't think so. And just allowing that space for each other. And then like, how could we make this work? Do we
Yeah.
want this to work? Could it work?
What I think is the most important too is that when you ask each other those questions, is that you hold each other accountable because I have to
Right.
do this too, is coming up with the answer.
Right.
So when I ask a question to myself and
Mm-hmm.
I wrote that down about what are you owning right now? And is I have a handful of questions that I've asked, and this is primarily pertaining to business
Right.
because I've already shelved, I'm not dating.
Right.
So I've got that there. That's under
Right.
control. But for business wise, I have asked myself these questions, and just like with you and Matt,
Mm-hmm.
you've asked yourself these questions, and now if you leave them open,
Right.
then they just sit there. And then
Mm-hmm.
something else happens, and then you get more questions that come about that
Right.
never get answered. And then your list compounds. And then all of a sudden, you're in this like tailspin.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the most important, and I'm really excited for when you get back from Peru
Yes.
to come up with these answers.
Yes.
And maybe that's something that we can share with each other because I
Yeah.
have some
I love that.
questions that I'm going to come up with actually this weekend when I go to Mexico. And that's my
Right.
airplane is I'm
Yeah.
answering, it's like
Yeah.
7 questions
I love
pertaining
that.
to my business that I will have answered. I put a time frame on them for myself.
Mhm.
I need them answered by
Mhm.
Wednesday.
I love that.
And for me, that really helps me with owning my shit
Mhm.
because I ask the question, I put a timeline on the answer,
Right.
and I
So you
answer
have
it.
to answer it. I love that.
Mhm.
And that would be good for me because sometimes I'm a little flighty like that.
Yeah.
And one thing we've actually popped in when you were explaining that, one thing we've started doing annually is writing down, is there somewhere we want to go?
Yeah.
Is there things we want to do around the house? Is there like, and we just write some kind of like a wish list almost of
Mhm.
things that we want to get accomplished. And then it's like, but let's prioritize them. Like, what
Mhm.
is doable? What's like last year we wanted to take the kids to Europe. We had never been. So we went to
Mhm.
Switzerland and, just little things that, because if you don't prioritize them, you
No.
don't write them down, then
Right.
it's not going to get done. And
Correct.
if you don't budget for them, you don't plan for
Correct.
them, then it
Right.
becomes a whole other like, it's just so we've started doing that just the past couple years and then that's been
Mhm.
really helpful. So, but that's the external stuff. I
Yeah.
feel like it's great to do more of the internal stuff. Like
Yeah.
what do we personally need more of?
Which
So,
is the most important.
right. And that's where the intimacy comes in at
I
this
put it on my
stage.
calendar too. Do you put it on your calendar yet?
Sometimes in
Yeah.
my phone, I'll put in, like I need to
Mhm.
get such and such done by a certain date.
Yeah.
It'll pop up.
I'll put a deep dive in my calendar if I really need to, if I really need to prioritize some
Mm-hmm.
quiet time.
Mm-hmm.
I will put it in you put your dentist appointment in the calendar.
Yeah.
Why not put your This is what I ask
Yeah.
myself. Why
Yeah.
not put these times when you need to have some deep dive clarity and some
Yeah.
conversations with yourself and your
Mm-hmm.
spirits and your gods and
Mm-hmm.
whatever you believe in, like schedule that
I
shit.
try to do it on Mondays.
Yeah.
I feel like I do. Monday's like my day. Everyone's going back to work and I'm like
Yeah.
I'm like a
Quiet.
hairstylist. Like I
Yeah.
need Monday off. Like I need Monday
Yes.
time. I need to do my yoga. I need to
Yep.
take a long walk. I
I
need to
love that.
decompress from the weekend.
Yep.
I like really try to prioritize my Mondays as yes, I'm still working a remote. I can still chime in, but I set parameters around myself. Like
Yeah.
from 7:30 to 10 o'clock, that's
Mhm.
my time.
Yeah.
Nothing else comes into that time other than dropping the kids off, and that's my time. I don't schedule me. I block my calendar. So that's kind of my way of decompressing from the weekend and knowing like I'm getting my mind
Love it.
ready for the week.
So I think that should be our listeners or your listeners
Yes.
also their homework.
Yeah.
Is the This week right now,
Yeah.
get your calendar out,
Yep.
pick some time through the week,
Mhm.
and carve out 2 or 3 hours
Yep. For
to
yourself.
by yourself
What
and
do you
get
need?
work some shit out.
And what do you need in that
What do
time?
you need?
Is it quiet? Is it dancing? Is it cooking? Is it nothing? Like
Is it
whatever that looks like.
sex?
Is it
Is
sex?
it a
Is it
trip?
solo sex?
Is it solo?
Is it
Right.
whatever?
Yeah. Is it
Yeah.
snuggles?
Right.
Do
I
you need to
love
go
that.
eat some popcorn?
Right?
What is
Eat
it?
some popcorn.
Let's just talk about all the real
Is it
things.
snuggling donkeys? Like
Right.
Jen
Which
has a donkey. So
yes, I do,
there's
which
humor behind that. And chickens. I've snuggled
yeah.
her chickens.
Yeah.
Oh, good times.
So
I
good.
love that. I think that's a good note. I think that's a good note to wrap it up. Like, write down, what do you need? And we're going to do that. And we're going to podcast again. We have a sex and relationships
Mhm.
podcast coming up. So stay
Yes, we
tuned.
do.
A whole other version of Crystal is going to be out there. Be ready. Um, but it makes it so much
We'll put
fun.
parameters on it.
Yeah, whatever. Maybe we won't. Who
Maybe
cares?
we won't.
Maybe we
Who
won't. Who
knows?
knows? Stay tuned. Awesome. Thank you, Jen, so much for being
Thank
here and
you.
sharing your heart and sharing this space with me. I love you. I adore you. And I'm excited for this again.
Thank
I
you.
feel like we need like a round table. We need to bring Lauren in. We need to do this again.
It'd be so fun.
It would.
Yes to
That's
that.
happening.
That's happening.
Awesome.
I love you.
Love you. Signing off, guys. Have a great day.